Thank you all so much for being here. I'm super, super excited to just go into depth with rowing because I think that as coaches, with our main big three components of our workout, the treadmill stations, the rowing stations, the weight floor stations, I think the vast majority of coaches, we feel very comfortable coaching the treadmills, comfortable coaching exercises on the weight floor. I mean, this is all part of personal training certifications and whatnot. But with the rower, if there's any sort of inkling of doubt in our minds about how rowing should look, I think just in general that really discourages us from doing the hands-on work that we need to do with our members individually and that coaching over the microphone as a whole to really build strong, powerful rowers. And so my goal today is to basically just, hopefully we can all walk away just super sure about how rowing needs to look and what we can do to change how our members row to help them row the way they should be rowing. And so we've got a bunch of different topics to go over through today, but it's actually going to be pretty simple and straightforward because I think sometimes if I've done a few of these in the past and I feel like I kind of just go on and on about very specific things where I think if we can just get some general key ideas down, I think it's just going to translate really well. It's going to sink in a little bit more. And then at the end, we can just talk about questions, more specific scenarios, things like that. It should be a good time. So there's not going to be much working out to do or anything, just a lot of demonstration and a lot of just talking stuff. So taking a look at our first point here, setup and body positioning. So this is a really interesting point because this is something that I feel like this is over the course of the last couple of years of experimentation with my own rowing, not only in class with the WaterRower, but outside of using WaterRowers and other rowing machines as well. The foot placement setup is something that I think we need to fine tune a little bit more to help biomechanically make the stroke a little bit easier for a lot of our members, especially for the members that struggle with that, have some weight to lose, for instance. I'm sure we've all been there in a scenario where some members that are extremely heavy tend to have a hard time getting a full range of motion rowing stroke. And a simple change we can do with our foot placement not only is going to help them, but is going to help everyone. So we've heard the term strap across the widest part of the shoe. What I've found in the last couple years of coaching rowing and again this experimentation is that dropping our feet as low as we can comfortably seems to produce a more optimal and safe rowing stroke than just this generalized strap across the widest part of the shoe. And so what I've done recently is helped members specifically drop their feet lower. And what I mean by that is having less pairs of holes showing on the foot plates. And so a general rule of thumb that I've been using is 6 pairs or less for women, 4 pairs or less for men. Just as an experiment to help people see for them to try it out and see how it works. And it's been getting an amazing amount of feedback because typically our members tend to row with the feet way too high. And what I've learned too is that when we say our 5 to 7, whatever the pairs of holes showing for men and women, what they end up thinking is the pairs showing on top of the shoe, not the foot plate itself. And that was something that I went years without even realizing that was happening. And then so we see members bringing the foot plates as high as possible. And in fact, the higher our feet are, the more biomechanically challenging it is to get a full rowing stroke. And this really has to do with the position of the feet and the seat. And with the WaterRower design specifically, the foot plates are built much more higher and in level with the seat than more of the conventional rowing machines like the Concept 2, the Matrix Rower, and a lot of the more bigger name rowing brands. And because the feet tend to sit so high with the seat, this is what makes it extremely challenging to get a full range of motion in the front end of the rowing stroke without rounding our back. Because the higher the feet are in level with the seat, the more your back is going to be rounded when you come up to the front end of the rowing stroke. Just because your hips are sitting higher, it's harder to sit forward more. And if you have something in the way too, it makes it even more challenging to protect our back. And when our members are going hard, we're pushing our members as hard as we can. All it takes is one overextension in the front here with the feet set too high, the back curved too much for them to get hurt. And all of a sudden, coach, I need to use the bike instead of the rower. How many times have you heard that? I use the bike instead of the rower for weeks. And then it's trying to manage all the cards and stations and everyone that has to modify like that. So setting the feet lower, I want you guys to give it a try real quick. And so what I encourage you to do is instead of the widest part of the shoe, I want you to try to set it around the ball of your foot, or try to go as low as possible without it feeling uncomfortable. Like you don't want the strap around your toes, but you want it sort of at the base of where the ball of your foot is. And just as a reference point, for me, I'm a size 14 shoe, and I go with 2 pairs of holes showing, and that seems to be the limit for me. And I want you to just see how that feels with your feet sitting lower. All right, so I'm gonna come around and just kind of look at some feet real quick. Like this is already looking awesome. And did anyone, like, is this how you guys have set up in the past, or is this, I'd probably bump you up 1 set here, 1 set. Because again, we do want it to be comfortable still. We want, what?
I mean, it's higher than normal.
The strap is higher than normal. And that's a key thing too when communicating this to others, is either saying having the feet lower or the strap higher. So just be articulate with that, because it's easy to get confused. I just got confused right there. So this leads into the second part of this, which is body positioning. Because the foot setup and the body positioning, honestly, if you can get members to keep these 2 parts in mind, it's gonna make their rowing just infinitely more successful. And so now with the feet set lower, what we wanna do is we always wanna sit forward on our sit bones. We don't wanna get trapped with our butt underneath us like this, because we can see that if I come to the front end of the rowing stroke with my hips underneath me, back gets rounded. It's hard to get that full lean at the front end. And so to sit forward on the hips, I've found that it's hard for a lot of people to kind of conceptualize what that means. As fitness people, we know that just means scoot forward like this. But to put it into terms that to help members understand more, is I try to say, try to sit on the backs of your thighs. And that teaches people that it's not scoot this way, it's scoot this way. And now that we've done this, with the feet lower, I want you to just slide yourself up to the front of the rowing, just to the end here. Do you see how much more comfortable it is for your back to kind of lean forward with your legs compressed? Now what I want you to do, unstrap your feet. I want you to add 4 pairs of holes. 4 pairs from where you just were. This is a simulation of maybe like a partner run row, where the partners just hop in and don't change the foot plates. So some of you might just be maxing it out all the way. So basically just get it super low on your shoe. And now, so now sit up. Try to bring yourself forward. Doesn't it feel a little bit more awkward trying to come forward? Like you're just not quite as strong in that forward lean position. And so that's the theory behind dropping the feet, is if we can get the feet to sit lower than the seat by as much as what's comfortably possible, it's going to be easier to get that compression forward. And when you translate that topic of widest part of the shoe to other rowing machines, like the Concept 2. You guys have heard of the Concept 2 rower? It's the fan one. The way that machine is set up, the foot plates are already set lower. And so when you go widest part of the shoe on the Concept 2, it gives you the lower on the feet here, if that makes sense. So I'm not sure if that original concept got translated from the Concept 2 to our workouts or what, but I would encourage you to try to encourage your members' feet to sit a little bit lower. And this is something that you can say, but I found it much more effective to find the individuals where you can see that their feet are clearly, like the strap is clearly way too low on their feet, and just say, hey, let's drop it a couple holes. And so over the average of people, some people obviously have really small feet, some people have really big feet. I have found that saying, let's try for 6 pairs of holes or less for women, let's try 4 pairs of holes or less for men, has been a really big game changer. So that's something to consider, something to think about. Now, we came to that body positioning of that lean forward at the front, of just being able to sit on the backs of our thighs. And it's from this position that we can transition into the key. And this is just the ultimate holy grail of what good rowing is. And I just call it lean and swing. Rowing is a tall person exercise. Taller rowers have a natural advantage over shorter rowers, but that doesn't mean we all can't row as tall as possible. But what that involves is that involves us getting our shoulders in front of our hips, leaning in and swinging back, and getting members to understand that they need to lean forward at the front and swing back at the back end translates to almost just instant 50 plus watts on members that don't think about that every stroke. And this ends up being a very, very easy thing to coach. But the reason why it's so powerful to do that has to do with the hip hinge. You know, a deadlift being one of the strongest exercises that we can do on a weight floor. It's that action of the hip swing that the max power is generated. On the Concept 2, there's this really cool screen called a force curve, where you row and it shows you sort of how your force is being distributed throughout the rowing stroke. And a lot of people think that it's this initial step that's the most power of the stroke. But the peak of which you get max power in the rowing stroke is not here, but it's halfway through your swing back. So it's after the legs have gone flat and you start the swing. That's the point where max power comes in. And again, it's because we're getting that hip swing. And anyone who's sat down and done a long row, you feel that you ever feel like the backs of your legs or your butt is like cramping up? That's supposed to be happening. It's because those muscles are really firing off and they're working, but we're seated. Like it's almost like doing bicep curls with like a blood flow restriction cuff on, where like eventually you would start cramping because that muscle's working, but the blood flow doesn't flow as well. So if you've ever had that, if members ever complain like their butt is cramping, you say like, well, you're doing something right, because that's just how it is. And so, you know, little butt shimmies here and there help to alleviate that, but that's just a small point I wanted to talk about. So our goal is to make members understand that shoulders need to be in front of the hips at the front of the rowing stroke, and they need to be behind the hips at the back of the stroke. That's the key thing. And if we can set them up with low feet, sitting on the backs of their thighs, that's going to help with the lean forward and the swing back right away. Because we know how to coach the order. Legs, core, arms. Arms, core, legs. We know that order. But now we've set it up to a point where we can focus, make sure shoulders are forward at the front, legs, swing core, pull arms. And that way it's translating more biomechanically efficiently. So lean and swing. Any questions on that so far? Make sense for the most part? So with that idea in mind, we're going to try to keep that in mind as we attack these different common issues that happen from doing this. And so I broke down the 4 biggest issues that I've seen over the years of coaching of rowing, and just talking about how we can apply our lean and swing and a couple little finite changes to help address these. So the first one is shooting the slide. And so this is literally like a direct translation of thinking legs first. Because like watch what happens when I only use my legs. I'm going to use nothing else but legs. The handle doesn't even move. The legs go down, but the handle's not moving. And this is a common thing if we're constantly saying over the mic, legs, core, arms, well, they just go legs, core, arms, legs, core, arms. So what does it mean to actually use the legs? It has to do with this phrase of every inch the seat moves, the handle moves as well. So notice how when I was shooting my butt before, the seat's moving, but the handle's not moving. So that's where the disconnection is. We need to get to the point where every inch that seat is scooting back, the handle is moving with it. That is connecting the leg drive. Now this can be from a few different things, but one thing that I've really found is very helpful. Can I have a volunteer? Yes, go on. Go ahead and take a seat. Here, what size shoe do you wear? 8. I'm gonna go 5 pairs all showing for you. There you go. Cool. So when we saw the shooting the butt back, understanding that we need to connect every inch the seat moves with the handle, a drill that I've done with members is I've had them hold the handle. So go ahead and grab the handle like you're going to take a rowing stroke. And so if the issue is their butt scooting back, don't let go of the handle, okay? So just hold on to it. What I want you to do is I want you to press with your legs, but don't let your seat move. Go ahead, push back with your legs, but don't let your seat move. Hard. Do you feel that connection?
How do I do that?
Do you feel it? So just like a nice, slow, steady pressure, like you would take a rowing stroke. Do you feel that tension in your legs and in your back?
Yes.
So I do that with members, and I say, if you feel that tension in your legs and back, and then I say, okay, now do that find that same feeling, go. And then they connect it. So if that's something if you've seen members struggling with before, and you can't quite get them to figure out how to connect the legs, don't be afraid to grab the handle. Just tell them, don't let go of this, and I want you to very slowly push with your legs, but don't let your seat move. And what happens if it's a real big issue that they have is you will see that when they first push against you, their seat will move. You'd be like, that's what we need to stop. So press, but don't let the seat move. And all of a sudden, their lats connect, their quads connect, and then you say, okay, go. Do that, but I'm not going to hold it. Find that same feeling, and it connects. So that's a big way to address that. So I wouldn't be afraid to get hands-on. If I were you, just be careful. Don't tell them not to drop the handle. Don't let go, because you don't want it to hit you. It's not going to hurt them. Only thing that would happen is it would fly at you. So, yeah. Exactly, yep. Because if you keep it's almost like math of like if every inch the seat moves, the leg has to move. Then if the handle's moving 0, the seat has to move 0. And if it moves at all, then you're not getting that math. There you go, yeah. So just give it a couple tries. Let's move into some more things to think about, and then we can take some strokes. So let's go into early lean back. Now, let's say they know they have to use their legs. They know how to connect the handle with the legs. But a common thing we see is this. Watch me. Do you see what's going on here? So I'm leaning back before I push the legs. I'm getting a push with the legs. It's connected at the legs. But what are we missing? We're missing the strongest part of the stroke, which is the swing back. That has to happen after the legs have driven down. And so this is where, of course, whenever you're helping someone out row, make sure that you ask them if you can touch their back or whatever. But this is where a light couple fingers on the back of someone while they're rowing will help prevent this. Because if they're opening up early, we need to prevent that, and we need to go legs first, then open up. And so this is a good time. We're at the front end of the rowing stroke. If they start to open up, gentle fingers on the back of their, between the shoulder blades can help bring them forward and practice that swing back. So that's the cue that I use to help do that. And that's where you're going to see a lot of your really, really fit rowers, like the really, really fit athletes that should be going high watts. If there's someone that's kind of like you feel like they should be bringing more watts, that's usually a big issue that happens to more of the topper end athletes that know to use their legs, but don't quite have that sequencing down yet, where the legs really do have to go flat or almost flat before the hips start to swing back. So don't be afraid to put a hand there, help them figure that out, have them slow it down. And then from there, they'll pick it up. The next issue, early knee bend. Okay, this is by far the most common issue that we see. And that can happen in a variety of ways. They can just bend the knees right away, carry the handle up. It can be subtle, like that. It can manifest in a few different ways. And this is where, again, I think, being hands-on with the members is the most effective way to help them with their form. Because there's only really so much we can say that's going to help with rowing being such a technical movement. Like, rowing has so many components to it. If someone really hasn't rowed before, or they haven't rowed for years and years and years, like, conceptualizing what we're trying to say is just really hard to do. I'm trying to think of something else that would be similar to that. It's almost like cueing, I don't know what an example would be. But for this issue specifically, it's time to hold some knees down with a couple fingers and to help slow members down on their return back up. But a drill that I've discovered recently, it's called the push down drill. And so what you do is you force members that when they finish their rowing stroke, they have to push the handle down and onto their thighs. And what that does is that forces them to go over the knees before they bend. Because if they do their knee thing, their knees get in the way. And so you can tell members, you can come up to them as they finish the stroke, okay, push the handle down over your legs. And then they'll be like that. And I'll be like, okay, so here's the issue. So we need to make sure arms come out first, use our core to lean forward, and then bend our legs. But for now, let's push down over the thighs, make sure the handle's over the knees, and then get the lean forward. I found that to be the most effective and simple thing for people to do. Like, you can tell people, push the handle down every stroke. Instead of being like, okay, hold it down, arms first, lean your core, bend the legs. Giving them an objective of something to work on, because we're all over the place, right? Like, we got treads, we got wave floor, we got, 11 to 14 other rowers to deal with. If you can come up to them and say, hey, let's do it, press down over your thighs each stroke, that's going to really solve that issue a lot. So don't be afraid to get in someone's face and tell them to do that. And show them what that looks like by, holding their handle, pressing it down, letting it go over their legs like that. because holding the leg engagement really is key to a strong, like, full stroke. Because if we cut the leg drive early by not holding it and bending the legs, I mean, it just makes it so that we can't set up our swing. We're not getting the full effect of the stroke, the full effect of the lean back or the core engagement that rowing is known for, right? Rowing works 84% of your muscles, but it doesn't if you're shortening up your stroke every time. You're not getting that, that rectus abdominis, those obliques firing in, everything working together to hold you steady if you're not holding this position and getting your handle out before the knees bend. So that's the drill that I would encourage you to use. Okay, now the last one, the still can't get watts. This person looks like they're rowing really well. They're rowing legs, core, arms, arms, core, legs. Can you guys see what I'm doing wrong? This is a really, really hard one. Okay, how about that? It's hard to see, right? So what the issue is, and this has been more of a new discovery. No, so we'll talk about that. That's not the issue though. Have you guys at the gym done a straight arm lat pull down where you pull the bar down like this, right? Where do we feel the max stretch on the lats? It's at the top, right? And it's like we almost like sit our hips back to stretch it before we go in. That translates to rowing as well, because if you've got the form down, you've got the sequence down, but you're not connected in your lats from the very start, you miss out on like 20% power. And so the issue that I was doing here is essentially having my hands too low relative to my shoulders. And so what we need to do is we need to try to get this level of shoulder to handle almost parallel. So I want you to see the difference here from how I'm sitting like this to how I'm sitting like this. Do you notice that slight change of where my handle is and my body position? I'm still hinged forward, but I can get a little more lift with the hands to really stretch the armpit out, to really get that lat engagement. And now from here, as soon as I start, the second that I press my legs, the handle is connected. Compared to when I kept my handle low, I press, and it's not until like a half second later that my lats engage in, the arms really straighten out. So notice that, it kind of goes up as I drive. That is a very common thing for the people that really listen to you, they're trying the sequence, they're super fit, and it's just like, why aren't they getting watts? Why are they still at whatever they are relative to their body size? So I would tell people, I would have people stop at the very front and I would say, we want to try to stretch out our armpits more. That's the terminology I've been using. And so helping them go with a little bit more of a lift, a little bit more of level handle to shoulder. And I think for a lot of us coaches too, that might really help your form as well. We were working on this a little bit at Natomas a few days ago. And so that is something that I think is something really subtle that you want to work with on the people that are more towards like the higher end of like, they get the form, they get the sequence, they're not really victim of these other issues. So
Basically, to get their watts higher in that case would be like incorporate more of your full body rather than just thinking from the legs.
Well, just engage your lats more so you can feel it from the start is the idea. So helping them, because I'm not saying to reach more. You don't want to reach more, but if we are sitting properly, which is part of the very beginning with the foot placement and the body positioning, going from here to here is not going to injure someone, or it shouldn't injure someone if they're sitting correctly. And so when they're like this, watch their handle. Is their handle close to these knobs here? Your handle should be carrying in line just above the monitor. Now this is also, this translates in one other way, which is another very common thing, and that's going from here down and back. You ever see this? Because you say like, they go arms, core, legs, drop. Arms, core, legs, drop. And so this is where when we row, we don't want to have tension in our shoulders on the way back out. And so if you're rowing out straight all the way, it's actually not ideal. And I'm victim of this in the past of coaching this. I say that this handle should go straight in and out of the machine the entire time. But it's not quite the case anymore. Or at least like from a physiological standpoint, you can get away with not carrying it completely straight out, but dropping it slightly to relax your shoulders more so you're not carrying tension up here on the way out. We know that the front deltoid is engaged when we do this. But if we can keep the handle lower and go for a gradual lift by the front, we're connected. So notice I'm not lifting and going back. It's almost like I tap down slightly to relax my shoulders. I'm not scraping my thighs, but I'm still not engaged here in the shoulders. And the path takes a slow but steady upward trend as I come up. So it's not going from up to down, it's going down to up a little bit at the front. Down to up a little bit at the front. So that's going to relax the upper body. And then as long as it's a slow and gradual return to the top where the handle is in line with the machine, your handle's not here, it's up here, you're going to feel that engagement right away. Cool? Cool. I know that's kind of a lot, but these have just been different like theories and stuff that have been played with over the last few years. And so I really want to get some time maybe to play around with those at the end and see what you guys think. But those are the main common issues that I think that if you can address those with these different, personal touches that you can give, I think it's going to make a huge difference. Now let's talk real quick about rowing versus sprinting, because with our short rows, 200, 500 meter row, 2 benchmarks. Especially the 200 meter, the 200 meter is just not good rowing. To maximize the 200, you get members say, how do I row the fastest 200 meter possible? Rowing the fastest 200 meter possible requires really, really, really bad form. And so that's just how it is as far as maximizing. And so there really is a certain balance that we need to play with as far as not making people hurt themselves, but helping people perform, because it is a bit of a different change in form. So when we're doing what I just called rowing, the real form, couple checkpoints. We talked about the shoulders. Shoulders in front of hips at the front. Handle level with the machine. Knees over ankles. That is the cue as far as leg compression goes. From a physics standpoint, biomechanical standpoint of loading our legs maximally, knee over ankle at the front. And so for me, this is what it looks like. So if you look at this here, you can see that my feet aren't completely flat. They're not, because I don't have the ankle flexibility to lay my feet flat. That is okay. And if you watch any professional Olympian row, you'll see vast majority of them have that slight heel lift. Some of them don't, because they are extra flexible back here. But there's nothing wrong with having your heels lift up on a rowing stroke, as long as we are trying to achieve that knees over ankles compression. That is going to give people the tall person length that they need. Again, it all varies depending on our own height, but that knees over ankle landmark is the compression we're looking for. And that's going to help people get the most optimal long stroke. Think like today's workout of the 6-minute row in the 3-group class. Like giving that cue of like every stroke rowers, let's try to get knees over ankles every stroke. That's going to be the most successful for any row, honestly, 500 meters or more. You can play that out to like 400 or 300 depending on someone's fitness, height, capability, etc. And so that's why like a sprinting range, it's hard to give a specific range for that, because honestly, like someone who's really short and maybe a lot older, not a lot of experience, 300 meters is going to take them a while. Whereas if it's someone who's super athletic and can go crazy hard, like that's more of a sprint for someone who, it all varies. So it's a bit of a spectrum. But when it comes to things like 200 meters, you get members that are asking you, like, how do you sprint that the fastest? The idea is to have a higher stroke rate, basically more turnover of strokes. And that's because the row is so short, you are better off taking more strokes than you are taking efficient strokes. So the only real change there is the leg compression. And instead of going knees over ankles, you go to the point right before your heels lift. So for most of us, that's going to be about right here. But notice everything else about the stroke. I'm still seated exactly the same. I've still got shoulders over hips. I've still got the handle out into the machine. But when you don't, because our muscles work as like rubber bands. Like if you overstretch them, you can't activate them fast enough to go back. But if we can stop ourselves right before essentially our quads stretch too much, we can get a really high turnover of strokes. So it just comes from kind of stopping yourself short and coming back up. Now, if you watch like the world records being pulled on YouTube for this type of row, you'll notice that their leg compression doesn't go past here. And it's almost all hip swing because they're just taking as many possible strokes as possible with barely any leg drive because it's just about that high volume of strokes. So I think the middle ground, instead of doing that, is to help coach members say, let's see if we can shorten up our range of motion, keep your feet planted on the foot plate. That's all. So, but still keep that same lean and swing. Everything else stays the same, just shortening the leg compression. And then try to aim for a higher stroke rate. So those are really the only things that would separate normal rowing from what we see in almost any case compared to like a 200-meter row. Some athletes on the 500-meter row, like that technique, that like shorter feet planted technique, some of them can use that, but that's not something that you would want like everyone to use. So I would say maybe if like it's a talk with like, 6'4", 220-pound Johnny who's like really gonna kill this 500-meter row, you could tell him to work on keeping the feet flat. But for most people, you would want to stick with even that longer knees over ankles rowing for things like 500 meters. Okay, now just wanted to touch on pacing for watts, split, and miles per hour. Now I put it in that order because that seems to be the most common occurrence as far as when we change our monitors. As far as pacing goes for watts, we know that in our coaching notes that we see, for instance, push watts being about 25 to 50 over base, all outs being 50 plus over whatever your base is. And that works really well. It really does. The issue, what is someone's base watts? What is their base watts? Coach, what should I be at? That, if someone asks you that, that is like someone asking you, how fast should I be running for my base? We're all different. We're all different, and especially with rowing being so much favored based off of body size, you cannot tell someone what base watts to do. They have to use their monitors, and this is where we need to really, really use our tech to our advantage. Because with base, especially when it comes to the warm-up, what I found really, really helps, rowers, as we strap in, let's continue to add pressure per stroke, watching our top right watts increase until you see your heart rate hit blue. Once you hit blue, I want you to hold that top right number just like you would holding your treadmill base. And I want you to hold it there for the next 2.5 minutes. And by the end, they'll be in green. It is incorrect, in my opinion, to say row until you get to green and that's your base watts. Because that can be anything. They could take 20 strokes, all of a sudden get to green, be at 300 watts. Like that's not just the right terminology. Like it's not a more consistent terminology. But if you can tell them, let's add pressure per stroke until we hit blue, and then hold that top right number, and if it takes you to green, that's your base. Then that's a more appropriate base for people. So that's how I would encourage it to be coached during the warm-up. And that helps people get familiar with their rowing monitor, which is something that they need to be checking in with. Too often are members' eyes just wandering around the room. You need to know how fast you're going because on the rowing machine, you have to make your speed. On the treadmill, you just have to not fly off, right? You just hold your pace. As long as you don't fly off, your heart rate will go up, it'll get to where it needs to be. But there's a little bit more accountability on the rower. And that's just the matter of fact. Yeah?
I have a question. Halfway through transition, like today was a good example. What about the people who don't warm up on the rower?
Okay. So that's tricky. And personally, I have found that a lot more challenging to coach, like that's your base, 25 to 50 over it. And so what I do instead is, for instance, on a block of like, okay, we're gonna do minute push, minute base, minute push, minute base, kind of like how it was today. Have them push and say, let's make this push feel like it does on the treadmills. And then as soon as you transition to base, rowers, you know how on the treadmill, when we hit base, we know that it's not a rest and recovery. We know that there is still a little bit of effort that it takes to hold base. We need to find that effort here on the rower. We need to still keep pressure per stroke, but let's try to keep those watts no more or no less than 50 below what you just pushed at. So that way you've translated it more into a general sense without having them specifically know. And then if they can't hold within 50, like if they're dropping way lower than that, then we know that they push too hard. But they'll tend to learn that over time too. If like on the mic we go back to a push, all right, rowers, let's try to get those watts 25 to 50 above what you were just holding at base. And if we can reiterate that often enough, those that really want to learn and figure it out, they will pick up on that and they'll learn to adjust themselves from there. But when in doubt, numbers aside, it needs to feel like it does up there. And we know, and I think especially like calling out a base on a rower after a push, we know it doesn't feel like a recovery when we go from push to base on the treadmill. So let's make sure we're adding pressure per stroke still. We still have a bit of a press. Try not to take it off. Those are some words that I like to throw around. So that's really good. That's a really, really good question. So I would say just kind of honing in on that on the warm-up though. Over time, it becomes a little more natural to say, and helping to encourage members too to start at different stations. I know a lot of members never start on the rowers. Like, I think if we can get a lot of more people to start on the rowers, they'll get that more experience of learning that and use it more. So yeah, that's how I would coach watts. Split is of course a little different. We know that split time, it's measuring, it's like a fitness watch. If your pace per mile, if you're running outside, it's telling you your pace per mile. If you start running faster, your pace per mile goes down. Same thing on the rower, it's just showing your pace for every 500 meters. That's how I try to explain it to members, because when you say split, if they're not a swimmer or a high school athlete, they're not going to know what a split is. And so instead of calling it a split, I call it a pace timer, showing you your pace, showing you at that intensity, you will finish 500 meters at that time. When coaching it, our coaching notes say push between 5 and 10 or so splits below base. You would want to coach them to a base split, just like how you would with watts. Keep working on adding pressure per stroke until you see your heart rate hit blue. Try to hold that number. Now the reason why we use split, which is the reason why the whole rowing world uses split, is because it's not as variable as watts or as something like calories per hour. It's not as consistent, let's say, as like miles per hour, which is unique to WaterRower, which we will touch on. But it's a good opportunity for members. The reason why we set it on like those endurance days, for instance, is because it doesn't change as often as watts does. If you're rowing and it's saying 140, 137, 142, if it was set to split, it would show 208, 208, maybe 207, 208. Like it's much more consistent of a variable. But articulating to members, letting them know that rowing harder means that the split will go lower. Just something to articulate maybe in the lobby intro or whatever row they're doing. Rowers, we're set to split time today. The harder you row, the lower that top right number will be. So, yes. But as far as like the coaching notes saying like 5 to 10 splits lower than base, 10 splits or more or lower for all outs, like that works really well. It translates just really well, just like 25 to 50 watts. 50 plus watts, etc.
On a split question.
Yeah.
I've never really had this answered, so I'm hoping somebody here can. Our rowers do 500 meter splits. They also do 2,000 meter splits. Why on the 2,000 meter row do we use the 500 meter split?
Because it simulates, I would guess it's more because it simulates more of sort of a race plan, which is more of a, I guess I don't have a super solid answer for that. In rowing, typically, like you pace yourself based off of 500 meter chunks, as well as like if you were giving a game plan to someone to help break down 2,000 meters into like 4 separate parts, being like, okay, let's start this off at this split, 500 meters in. Let's see if we can bring the split down by 1 split per 500, and making that like helping them kind of game plan it out more compared to it just saying like this is your projected finish. Because 2, if you for some reason fall off the wagon for like 5 strokes or whatever, like you have to, I don't know, your foot came out and you have to retie it in. You almost cannot get it back to whatever your projected split per 2,000 meter is. However, you'd be much more able to get it back to your split per 500 meter pace. That's what I've experienced with it. I've set it to the 2,000 meter split before for like the dry try, because I had never seen it before. Concept 2 doesn't have that function on there. And so it literally is projecting your current 2,000 meter row. Not just how hard you're rowing, but what your current 2,000 meter row would be. And so because of that, it makes it harder to kind of have a game plan approach to it, is what I would suggest. I wouldn't say it's the end of the world, though, and I think for a lot of people it actually might help them. But I also think understanding split per 500 meter, if we can get them to understand that during the workouts, they'll be able to use that to their advantage on a 2,000 meter row day. They'll know what that number means. They'll know how to go about moving it up or down as they need to. So that's all I would say. I guess because we wouldn't use the 2,000 meter split for anything other than 2,000 meter row. So that's what I think. Now, when it comes to miles per hour, this is the coolest thing about WaterRower, in my opinion. The fact that we have a miles per hour like setting is super cool, and as far as I know, it's the only rowing machine that has it unique to that. We can use that very easily translatable to the treadmills. When someone's rowing and we're having them row to their base, and the day is set for miles per hour, between 1 and 3 miles per hour of what you would do on the treadmills for the joggers and runners. For power walkers, obviously it's going to be a little bit different because power walking could be based off of a fitness level thing, it could be based off of an injury thing, whatever it might be. But hey, joggers and runners, right now, that miles per hour for our base, let's try to get that 1, 2, or 3 miles per hour above what you would do on the treadmills. Giving that range is going to also help people adjust based off of their skill level, based off of what they're capable of. The people that are really good at their form, they get the lean in the swing, they get the lat engagement at the front end. Like they are going to be 3 miles per hour or more over their base compared to a treadmill. But someone who struggles to deal with a lot more of these conceptual topics that we've talked about, they're gonna be closer to what they would do on a treadmill. But what's cool though is if we're going into a push row or an all-out row, we can move into those just like we would on the treadmills. If we're going into a push, 1 to 2 miles per hour over base. How is that achieved though? That's the question. And that's where we're gonna move on to stroke rate. And understanding stroke rate, I think, really comes down to understanding this bigger picture of speed versus pressure. Rowing is not about speed. There is no, like up and down means nothing because you can be rowing hard up or down, or you can be rowing soft up and down, flailing back and forth. Your pressure per stroke is what leads to how fast you're rowing. And so that, using the term pressure, I think is gonna be a really big game changer. And I think it's definitely something that you need to start incorporating into your vocabulary as coaches. When we have those when we have a workout that says stroke rate 24, for all these rows, and people are rowing at 24, you're doing your best to slow them down, and they say, Coach, it's not hard at 24. You need to press harder. That's what you need to tell them. You need to go to their rower, and as they come up, you say, press harder, press harder. But there's a balance of helping them learn to press harder, but still control the return. There is a very, very big disconnection between like turning your brain on and off based off of pressure, because it's like for a lot of people, if you're going hard, then you got to come up fast too. But as we see in elite level rowing, Olympic rowing, one of the main tests to qualify for the Olympic team is a 30-minute row test. First 10 minutes at 20 strokes a minute, second 10 minutes at 22, third 10 minutes at 24. And if they were on a WaterRower doing that, you would see splits at like 106 at 20 strokes a minute, because it's about the pressure per stroke. It's not about how fast up or down it's going. It's about how much delivery we're bringing to each step that we do. And so helping members think about, here's a couple phrases. Light switch. You're on and then you're off. You flick on the way back, you flick off on the return. Flick on, flick off. Like you have to almost snap at them, flick off, go slow. You can make it more of a fun phrase, like rowing through peanut butter, where you can tell them to drive hard, but on the way up, you gotta row through a thick wall of peanut butter. You know, like there's different ways to frame it, and it's gonna click for people in different ways. But getting people to control the return is not only gonna help them knock out the form, but they're gonna realize that it really does come down to pressure. And so like this is where, as coaches, like you need to get animated a little bit. Like when they're coming up to the front end, like go that push, get in their face, in a nice way, of course. But getting people to learn that it's just about pressing against the foot plates. You can row hard at any stroke rate. That's the big picture. Optimizing stroke rate is different, especially when it comes to like 2,000 meters. Like what stroke rate should I do? top-end rowing athletes, they can row a whole 2,000 meters at 36 strokes a minute, even the big guys, even the guys that are like 6'5 plus. But that doesn't necessarily mean that's how everyone should row. For, I would say, the least experienced individuals should be rowing the longer rows at a lower stroke rate. So like the less experience you have, the lower stroke rate you should be at. Because you know, these distances like 2,000 meters and such, you know, they're so daunting sometimes. But little do we realize that when we're rowing, every stroke you take, like your meters are getting there. Like you're gonna get there eventually. And so the more inexperienced members, helping them dial back that, hey, let's just take this one stroke at a time. Let's give good pressure each stroke, but let's just take it one stroke, one rep, like we would do on the weight floor at a time. That kind of eases people's minds a little bit, and that helps them get more of a sustainable pace going. Yeah, that's kind of the talk on speed versus pressure, but I'm happy to answer any more specific questions on that because I feel like I didn't quite cover it all. So does anyone have any questions on anything so far? Yeah.
I think like one of the biggest questions I've been getting is like, or I guess not necessarily in the WaterRower, but people are getting like really bad shin splints or they're getting, you know, issues with their calves. Is that a foot plate issue first, or would it be the pressure?
Okay, that's really interesting. So the question being, having shin splints, calf issues on the rowers, it's typically not from rowing that those issues are happening. It's usually a byproduct of the treadmill, because that is where, you know, on the treadmill, like we talked about earlier, we kind of joked about it, how you just have to not fly off. You can flop around on the treadmill, not fly off, and you'd finish the block, and you'd be sweaty. You really did hard. But we know that running is a very biomechanical motion, something that, just like rowing or anything else, takes a lot of practice to do really right. One thing I've noticed as I've been looking into running form a lot more is that it's really hard to coach good running as well. But, you know, with the idea of especially like our newer members going from doing nothing their whole life, sedentary, sitting, no stretching, no nothing their whole life, and then all of a sudden they're just running on the treadmill 4 or 5 days a week, and their calves are tight because they're not stretching outside of, I would say practice. It kind of is, but outside of these training sessions. And I would say that the calf issue tends to be because of other stuff. And so what I would encourage them to do is, if it's really bothering them when they row, to shorten up their range of motion. So just not change the foot plate, because we do want to keep that low, not mainly for the calves, but mainly, again, to keep our legs lower so that we have less sitting in our face when we row. We've got the system low. If we can keep the calves, if we can keep the heels down, that's going to relieve tension, but it's still going to allow them to lean forward. And then tell them to get a foam roller, sit on the ground, cross your ankles over the foam roller, scream in pain for a little bit, but start rolling out your calves before and after class. It's a game changer as far as, like, I'm sure a lot of you know that you have to stretch your calves and you got to roll them out. I think we need to get members to do that more.
I had a member complain of the same thing, and I used the cue you gave me. Don't let your heels lift the foot plate.
Yeah. Yep.
Just keep your heels down. That way you don't come further to, because once they come up and they get in that cramping position.
Yep.
Yeah. So I was like, just don't let your heels leave the foot plate. So they go into a shorter stride, but they get through the row.
Yep. And that's from keeping the foot plate still low. But again, yeah, shortening up the compression, that's exactly the right idea. But I think that's just a temporary thing, though, and that's why I think that's where the more recovery options need to be set in place. Let's get you stretching your calves, 2 times a day and doing stuff. And
I think something to look for in that, too, is like people who are swinging forward, they're literally using their shins to like pull them forward.
Oh, yeah.
So their shins are kind of tired.
Yes.
That's a good point, too.
Slow down and reach,
Yes, using the foot straps to pull yourself up is another big issue. Not only does it lead to those shin issues, but also to hip flexors. Because when you're not using your core to pull yourself up, you're just using your hip flexors. That's where people get a lot of hip pain. So if you've ever had anyone complain about hip pain before, that can be what it's from. Now, yeah, exactly, that too. Yep. But we still shouldn't be relying on our foot plates. Like I didn't mention on this, but everyone should be able to row with their feet off of the foot straps. Or it's really hard to do, but it's to help us understand that it is the core that is bringing us up, not the hip flexors, not the shins. So you can give this a try for yourself at some point. You can try it. Don't fly off, though. You got to be really slow when you first start. But you should be able, if you keep your core tight enough, to get that lean back, to get that lean forward and still feel connected per rowing stroke with your feet not clipped in.
Next big one, sure. Because you don't have time to put your feet in.
Careful. So can you get your shoulders behind your hips, legs flat as you pull on that handle? It's obvious. Oh, careful. But do you notice that you have to use your core a little bit more? Like it kind of forces you to lock in your abs just a little bit more. And that really, really helps you translate where you should be bringing your efficiency to the stroke.
One question I had for you I wanted to
Yeah.
get out today is the wrists in this position.
Yes. Thank you, Coach. Thank you for pointing that out. I forgot to put that on our talk.
I find myself when I'm being lazy, I do this.
Oh, yeah, we don't want that. So big. It's an uh-oh. Well, it's an uh-oh because this has been a really big thing recently. I've been hearing a lot about elbow issues. You know, I'm sure you guys hear it from members too, outside or inside elbow. Those issues happen when we're overusing our wrist flexors and extensors, which can happen a lot when we row, primarily through using our wrist flexors more. And so that happens from either elbows down or flicking in the handle. Our wrists, we're not supposed to be putting tension on our muscles to do that on a repetitive motion for hundreds, if not thousands of strokes. When it comes to wrists, the wrists need to be leveled. And when the wrists are leveled, it's very simple. The elbows are out slightly. They're not up. They're not down. They're just out slightly. And that should keep a nice level wrist for you. You should be able to pull that right below your chest, sort of right at the bottom of the sternum. Elbows out a little bit. And that's the wrist position. So
Do the wrists and the forearms stay in the same position through the entire row?
no, I would say that the forearms come out slightly.
I mean from here to here. Like the angle.
Oh, no, the angle would close. Yeah. The angle would close a little bit because it's not, rowing really isn't about this at the very end. Like you don't need to be pinching your shoulders back like this each stroke. Because that's not where most of your energy comes from the rowing anyway. The arms are there to finish the power that you've generated from the legs in the swing. It's not like this extra like pull right here. And I think doing that is actually going to help. That would wear out people's back muscles more than it would than if they weren't doing that. So that is actually kind of a big thing that I haven't thought about or haven't talked about a lot. And it brings up a really good point. I would definitely encourage not to worry too much about like pinching your shoulder blades back forcibly each rowing stroke. If they're pulling the handle below the chest, keeping their upper body relaxed, shoulders down, like that's all the engagement you need. Because we want to keep most of the force and the effort here. We want this to get tired. We don't want this to get tired or this to get tired. It's a really good point though. So yeah, wrist flat. Our coach, we used to, he didn't ever do it, but he was like, what if I came over and taped one of our boat wrenches on your wrist joint? Because it was in rowing, you have an oar that has to go in and out of a water, and you have to change the oar from squared to feathered. And so there's a lot of sort of turning of the oar, and a lot of times we were doing this. And he'd say like, don't let the wrench poke your wrists. Now, I've always found that as an interesting thing. Like if you taped a wrench below or above your palm, like you wouldn't want to stab yourself with the ends of that wrench. So elbows out slightly, keeps it flat.
Yeah,
Thumbs underneath.
Kind of it is. In my head, I think to myself that from here to here are in the same plane all the way back, all the way forward.
Gotcha. And so
my elbows to go out, but my wrist swing is staying in the same plane.
yeah, so yes, I guess there's a little bit of a slight closing of the angle slightly, but this comes down to more of what it would be like if you were rowing on the water. It's a really different sensation when you have oars in your hand compared to holding a handle like this, where in rowing you would never ever pinch your shoulder blades back like this because your oars would get caught on the water, or you wouldn't be what's called being on top of the oars. You always want to have the oars you want to be on top of it to the point where you can control the tap down and such. And when we go back here, we have a hard time kind of staying in control, staying on top of the handle. If that makes sense. More questions? Yeah?
I have two. One is the amount of members that hold on with their thumbs.
Yeah.
What reasoning, cueing to get them to
You know,
under, or does it not matter? Or
Yeah, that is a bit of a tricky one because, like, for instance, like gripping things like, you take it into a gym setting, something like a lat pull down, for instance, like you put your thumbs underneath, it's extra grip, and that helps for that. But in the case of rowing, it's much, I would say that with the thumbs over, like the handlebar can really slip out of your hands, especially if you're sweaty and you're taking multiple strokes. And I would say just because of that reason alone, it's good to keep the thumbs underneath. And so I think it just comes down to reiterating it and then just going up to someone and be like, hey, thumbs underneath. And just force them to. Yeah.
And then it's like,
yeah. So okay. So I would say it as, we want to minimize the risk of that handle flying out of your hands.
It's more of a safety. It's not necessarily.
I wouldn't say it's any like biomechanical advantage. Yeah.
Cool.
And that's just me being real about it. Yeah.
Love it. That's great.
Cool.
Question 2.
Yep.
The more deconditioned, newer rower coming in who has maybe a little bit more in front.
Yeah.
Noticing that sometimes when they're here.
The legs out. Yes. Okay.
So.
Yep. So I covered this in one of my YouTube videos. So when it comes to someone who has sort of a larger midsection, that's the question. Is like women with a baby. That works absolutely. So one thing to encourage. This is very specific to remember to those individuals. Having the foot straps a little bit looser. Typically, when it comes to having a larger midsection, I'm just going to just use that phrase. What tends to happen too is a lack of ankle mobility as well. Like you want them to be able to have their legs go out slightly because if not, like you don't want them rowing like this. Like that's just, you want to get a bit more of a range of motion there, and so. You don't want to tie the feet down all the way. If the members can loosen up the foot straps a little bit, that's going to allow for a little bit of wiggle room to allow your legs to go out slightly without it being like a huge strain on your knees. Notice that if your feet were locked in and you were pushing your knees out, like that's just external strain on your knees. But if you can allow your feet to turn a little bit, like I can keep my thigh still in a line with my feet at the front here. Biomechanically, this is not injuring me at all. Just like someone who has a slight turnout when they squat, for instance. So doing that, and then also, we don't want to overcompress though. If you've got a larger midsection. So that same concept of keeping the heels down that we would use for the calf or the shin issue, same idea. So being able to go from here to here, and this is still a very, very strong, effective stroke. So that would be the remedy that I would use. Go up to them individually, be like, hey, I'm just going to loosen these up for you a little bit. Just.
So because I think a lot of new rowers want to be able to row without having their feet strapped in. Is kind of my assumption. So that
Yeah.
Like if it's looser, they might not get the same pressure. Is that accurate? Or?
So they'll just be they're gonna just have to be very mindful not to try to pull themselves up with their feet too much. Yeah, their pressure on the way back though should be fine, but it's just like being able to have the core control of stopping yourself. It's just going to be a bit of a process, but I think those little tweaks, part of their whole journey of getting fitter and things like that, it'll come over time, but that's a good starting point, I think. No problem. Good questions. Anything else? At the end of these, I always feel like I've just said so much stuff and none of it's made sense. So I hope a couple things have clicked. Just want to thank you guys so much for sitting here and being a part of this. And I know it wasn't any sort of workout or anything, but if there's anything else you guys have for me, like you can let me know as we kind of clean up and head out and stuff. But thank you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.